This book is a collection of books, a library of books, crafted, collected together over many years. It's full of words, but as much as it's full of words, it's also full of pictures, word pictures. And what these word pictures, these stories do is they reveal things. And what's revealed in hundreds of stories and hundreds of images and pictures is a big story. A story of a God and his creation. A story of a God and his people throughout history. And a lot of this story, a lot of the pictures, the images are about the Jewish story. And in many ways at the hinge, at the heart of the Jewish story in history is the story of a man called Jesus of Nazareth. In this collection there are 4 accounts of the life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. And we have been together as a community working our way through one of those that's called Luke. And at this point, today in Luke's story, this young Jewish teacher has been causing a stir in the north of his country. And he's faced, most recently, a physical storm while he's been on a boat on a lake called the Lake of Galilee, the Sea of Galilee, Lake Gennesaret. And that's actually threatened the whole project that he's involved in, but he's calmed that storm. And so Luke's next story is on the other side of the lake. And so far this has been a Jewish story set in Jewish territory, but now this Jewish teacher has travelled to the other side of the lake, to non-Jewish territory. So that's known as Gentile. That's the words they use for anything that's non-Jewish. What he finds there is not maybe the calm that he's been seeking. Maybe he wants a break from all the opposition that's growing around him as his movement starts to move forward. There are all these opposition forces pushing back, the Roman occupiers, his own Jewish leaders. But here on the other side of the lake, what he finds is another kind of storm, if you like. What he finds is a human storm. What he finds is a man who is painted by Luke as in a wild situation, naked, screaming, living among tombstones. And if we pause for a second as Jesus steps ashore, and before we find out what happens in the face of this human storm, let's think again about the kind of pictures that Luke's painting with these words. He's telling a story of a Jewish teacher who's now travelled to a non-Jewish, a Gentile place. And there, this Jewish teacher meets a homeless man in chains, wandering around among graves. And then this story is going to talk about regiments or legions, which are the words used to describe Roman soldiers, and also about a herd of pigs. To any Jewish listener hearing Luke's account of this young Jewish teacher, there'd be a lot of layers of images going on here as these pictures come together. Their Jewish story is a story of a people who for a huge amount of their history were homeless, without a land, wandering. And they were constantly under attack from non-Jewish tribes and nations, Gentiles. For many, many years, they were a nation of slaves. They were chained, naked, facing death often, facing corruption and pollution from non-Jewish, from Gentile cultures. In their religious system, pigs were one of the animals that were designated as unclean, ritually unclean. And alongside that, faced by the Roman oppression that they have right now, pigs was an insult often used of their Roman oppressors. Romans who marched around in legions or regiments of thousands of soldiers. So with all these images, word pictures going on, maybe these listeners are wondering if Luke's telling as much a story about their own Jewish situation in the first century as about a man trapped by these destructive forces. Well, let's go back to the man. This man cries out, he screams, whether it's in the voices of the demons inside him that are described. And he recognizes, or they recognize Jesus as, they call him the Son of God. And here's another little theme of Luke's, that all these outside forces recognize just who Jesus is, while those around him, those of his own community, so often can't grasp what is being revealed. So this wild man gives himself the name Legion, or regiment, suggesting there's a whole lot of destructive forces coming together, demons. And these demons are worried because they assume that Jesus is powerful and is going to get rid of them. And so they beg for escape. They beg to escape into a herd of pigs. And the pigs rush into the lake and they drown. And I imagine a few of Luke's Jewish listeners will be smiling at the idea of a regiment of pigs drowning in a lake. The people who live in that area come out to see what's happened to this man. And they're probably not too pleased with what's happened to the herd of pigs, a valuable set of animals to them. But what they see, what they find, the picture that's painted by Luke is a man who's no longer trapped, a man who's free. A man who's sitting at Jesus' feet, so that's an image from someone learning from a teacher. And a man who's dressed, and a man who's in his right mind. At this point in the story, whether you're hearing it, whether you're reading it, maybe you just even heard about the story, it's so easy to get drawn into probably two big questions. Do demons exist? Or why pigs in a story like this? Now these are interesting questions. But as someone who loves questions, I wonder if they're helpful questions. And by that I mean, I don't knowingly experience problems with demons like this in my day-to-day life. And I don't have much dealings day-to-day with pigs or herds of pigs. But, as I said, as someone who loves questions, for me, better questions in this particular story are, do conditions like this exist? Does slavery exist? Do chains exist? Are there people, groups of people, individuals who are trapped by destructive forces that are stopping them being who they were made to be? And the answer is yes. And so then, what I want from this story is what Jesus does about that. And in this kind of story, Jesus calmly faces everything that gets in the way, all the destructive forces, and he deals with them. And then Luke, in this story, takes great pains to paint a picture of what it looks like, what the effect is of when Jesus is at work. This, it seems, is the Jesus project. This is the business that Jesus is in. This is what Jesus has come to reveal, what he says his Father is always about. Restoration, freedom, a human being now free to learn from Jesus and to be dressed and in his right mind and to live the life he was made for. This is what I'm interested in. This is what I want for myself and for everybody I know. I'm far more interested in that than in what happens to demons or pigs. This freed, restored man wants to go with Jesus, but Jesus tells him that he has to go home, that he's something else to do. And it's actually really simple. The man's task is to go home, to live his life, and to tell people what God has done for him. Now notice a little thing in Luke here. The man's been told to go and tell what God has done for him, but he goes and he tells people what Jesus has done for him. And Luke wants us to know they're the same thing. Our theme image for the next few weeks, one of the images we're going to put outside the church building and get people to play and to think about, is an open envelope with an invitation that says RSVP on it. Initials that invite a response. Everything Jesus does and says in Luke's story invites a response. In this particular part of the story, the destructive forces that are holding this man back, they respond by recognizing who Jesus is and how serious this is for him and that he is a threat to them getting in the way. The people around, maybe some of them involved in the pig business, respond that, well, Jesus is bad for that kind of business, so they They can't handle that. They want him to go somewhere else. The man's response is to turn to Jesus, to be able to go back home and then to get on with the life he was made for, and as he goes, to tell people about what God has done in his life, about what Jesus has done in his life. What about us? How are we to respond?